As you've seen by the title, today's video is going to be about 5 ways to break an addiction. And I want to stress, by addiction, I don't mean anything in particular. It's aimed towards addictions which people of my age, so around 17, 18, addictions which people going through academic education, college, high school, are likely going to fall victim to. So it could be vaping, video games, junk food, anything of the sort along those lines. So I'm going to give you techniques and methods to eventually break these addictions. Methods are in no particular order, but for viewer retention reasons, I'm going to leave my personal favorite method to break an addiction, which has helped me throughout my life break various addictions, which, from the previous video I talked about video games. That was one of my biggest ones. This was the main thing which helped me break my addictions. So make sure you stick around to the end of the video to see my favorite method. So method 1 is building willpower. Now the term willpower gets thrown around a lot in the self-improvement niche, and the definition changes depending on the person who you're watching, but the definition I've always understood it to be is resisting the actions which you want to do, which is different from discipline, which is doing what you don't want to do. So remember, willpower, resisting, discipline, doing. And how you can build your willpower is through, again, resisting, but progressively overloading your resistance. What I mean by that is, let's say, for example, you play video games for 3 hours a day. You decide that you want to cut down on the addiction. You decide that you want to try and stop it from happening. And what you should first do is not try and cut it off entirely. I know I mentioned in the video previously I made on video games that I was able to do that. But why I was able to do that is because I had nowhere else. I had no purpose. And I just got completely sick and tired of everything. Like, I kind of just hit rock bottom in a certain sense. And I was just able to just completely switch. It's kind of it's not something everyone can do. You kind of have to have things leading up to that for you to be able to do something like that. An addiction, break it just there and then. It's a hard thing to do. So if you can do that, fair enough, you go for it, try and do that. But for most people, what I'm going to recommend is as such. Don't try and cut it off. Moderately decrease the amount of time you spend doing the addiction. For example, this person plays for 3 hours a day. I would advise to try and use your willpower to build it up by cutting it down to 2 hours. So not completely erasing the addiction, but just slowly and steadily building your willpower and decreasing the amount of time you spend doing the addiction. By doing this building practice, you get used to the feeling of apprehension you get towards wanting to use your willpower. And when you get comfortable with that feeling, you can recognize when you should use your willpower. But by doing this practice, you get used to resisting desires. You get used to resisting the desire to do your addiction. And eventually you'll see progress. And when you start to see progress, the chances of you indulging in that addiction again severely decline. On top of the fact that you're building willpower and now you're seeing all this progress from not doing your addiction, the chances are in your favor. What I mean by that is that it will probably be more likely for you not to do the addiction because you've got all these reasons to not do it now, all this progress, all this willpower you built for yourself. So it'll be more likely for you to not do it than to do it. So until you get to this point, keep building your willpower, keep doing progressively overloading the resistance, sort of small, and work your way up. And until you reach that point, keep doing as such. One thing I want to add is you'll get to a point where there's 2 voices in your head. One voice is telling you to indulge in the addiction, the lizard brain, the Jeffrey side of you, or the VPN side of you. And the other voice is telling you to not indulge in the addiction, the good voice, the guy who's going to get you to where you want to be. But there'll come a time when both voices are agreeing with each other. Both voices are telling you to indulge. Both voices are trying to get you to do the addiction. And when that happens, remember your core fundamental beliefs of self-improvement. Remember that the addiction isn't good. Remember that if you indulge in it, you're just taking a step back from where you want to be. Remember who you are at your core, your purpose, your very, very being. Remember that and just ignore both voices. And eventually, the good voice will get used to that and start implementing it and telling yourself that. So the second method to break an addiction is similar to the first one, but it is building discipline. Now, as I mentioned previously, discipline is different to willpower, and it as well in social media and YouTube, all these sites, it gets thrown around quite loosely and loses its definition. What I've understood it to be is partly from the Mike Tyson quote. I quite like the way he phrases it. He says, discipline is doing what you hate to do, but doing it like you love it. And that is pretty much the nail on the coffin for discipline. That is entirely what it is in a nutshell. Doing what you hate to do, but doing it like you love it. Doing the hard work, especially when you don't feel like it, as Hamza would say. But that is essentially what discipline is. Now, how you build discipline is fairly simple, by doing what you don't want to do. And this can range from small things. Andrew Huberman, he calls them micro and macro sucks. So micro sucks being the small things which you can do to up your discipline, macro sucks being the bigger things to up your discipline. And the bigger things are likely going to be the better things for you, as is most things in life. The more you put in, the more you get out. But if you are struggling to push yourself to do these bigger things, these micro ones will help you get used to that feeling of resistance you have towards doing the action and overcoming it. So you get used to resisting, the feeling of resistance, and then overcoming it. So micro sucks could be something of, say you're cleaning your room and you drop something on the floor and you say, oh, I'll pick that up in a second. But then you pick it up right there and then. You have that feeling in your mind where you don't want to do it, but you overcome it. That's a micro suck. And by doing this, you actually increase an area in your brain. I think it's called the anterior midcingulate cortex or something like that. But anyways, Andrew Huberman says that it increases that portion of your brain. So you're actually increasing your discipline and the size of your brain. So the capacity for you to do discipline yourself is increasing alongside you doing these macro sucks. Through doing what you don't want to do, you'll be less likely to fall victim to the things which you want to do but know that you shouldn't. This is going to help you tackle addictions because you'll be too preoccupied in trying to improve your discipline and doing the hard stuff. And you'll see progression once again, similar to willpower. And when you see progression, you're going to want to do it more. You're going to strive to increase the amount of progression you're seeing. So you'll be less focused on indulging in the addiction and more focused on progressing your discipline. And so moving on to the third method to break an addiction, which is distraction. Now, I don't really think that this is a super effective method to break an addiction. It's more of a long-term thing, short-term thing. My apologies. More of a short-term thing. What I mean by distraction is, say whenever you have the urge to do something, addictive, whatever it is, video games, junk food, vaping, anything of the sort, you distract yourself from the addiction by doing something else. So let's say you have the urge to play video games and you distract yourself by going downstairs with your family, spending a bit of time with them, talking, and eventually you'll get in a flow state of just talking and talking and talking to them, and the thought of playing video games again won't even cross your mind until you go to sleep that night. I say it's a short-term thing because it doesn't go away. You haven't defeated the desire. You haven't crushed it. You've only nullified it. You've only suppressed it. And when you've suppressed it, it will come back and bite you. It will attack you again. And if your retaliation is to just distract yourself again, you're just going to kind of fall in that loop of suppression, it coming back, suppression, it coming back again. It's a short-term thing. So let's say building discipline and building willpower is, one day it doesn't work out. Distraction can be a viable thing just for the short term. So long term, you definitely build your discipline, build your willpower, do all these good habits, but short-term distraction is a viable option. One thing I have wrote down on the script here is you are less likely to go back to what your addiction is because you found purpose elsewhere. So this is going to lead on to the fifth one. So not the fourth one, but the fifth one. Purpose is very important to breaking addiction. Very, very important to breaking addiction. So distraction kind of gives you a short-term version of that. So a short-term purpose, a little layer, purpose layers for you to nullify your addiction, but not to completely suppress the desire. So the penultimate method to break an addiction is shedding your identity. Now, I don't mean getting a fake passport, fake ID, going to a different country, shaving your head and starting a family. That's not what I mean. I mean shedding your VPN identity, shedding your identity who you were and adopting the identity who you want to be. What I mean by that is becoming the person who you want to be and saying that you already are that person. Tell yourself that you don't even do the addiction. Tell yourself that it is beyond you, that you don't even need it. Adopt an entirely different personality. Eventually, your mind will kind of repress memories. This has happened to me. Like, back in my high school days, I was, quite the VPN, quite the Jeffrey. And when I try to think back to it now, it's really hard. Like my brothers, my friends, they tell me stuff which I used to do back in the day, things I said, actions I did, activities I did, and it's like repressed in my mind. I can't even bring back the memory. It's like it never even existed because I've shedded my identity. I've shedded who I was. And when you get to that point, it's very, you get filled with a lot of pride, that you don't even comprehend the person who you were. It's so beyond you that you can't even contemplate the idea of you even being like that. It's really, really satisfying once that happens to you. And again, it's a very good method to break an addiction and can be a very long-term one if you keep building your willpower and your discipline alongside it. You've got to make yourself accountable as well. Don't just say, I'm this guy, I'm that guy, while you're shedding your identity. You've got to be accountable. You've got to make sure that you are that guy. Because once you're saying these things, people are going to see the holes if you're not doing it. The water's going to leak out of there. You can't just say that you're going to do these things. Yeah, it feels real good to say it. It feels great to say, oh, I'm going to make 10K a month. I'm going to go to the gym 3 hours a day. I'm going to do this. It feels great to say it, but it feels horrific to do it, doesn't it? Doing it is the hard thing. Saying it is easy. But if you can do it and say it, the pride you will feel is incomparable to anything else. So make sure you're not just saying it. Make sure you say it to hold yourself accountable, but also do it. Otherwise, you'll be a hypocrite. So the fifth and final method, and the method which I believe to be the best way to break an addiction, is staying with purpose. As I mentioned in the distraction method, purpose is a incredibly long-term method for you to break an addiction. Part of the time why you're indulging in these addictions is because you don't have any purpose. You feel meaningless. You feel like you have no guidance in life. So you just do these things to give you temporary boosts, temporary happiness, because you don't have anything else to do. You don't have a reason to live. How you find purpose is through various methods, but the two which I find to be the most effective is through suffering and through meditation. Which one suits you best is going to be completely personal, but for me, I find a lot of purpose through suffering, through doing hard things, through doing incredibly hard things, and journaling as well. Journaling is a very good method too, which kind of links into meditation in a way, because when you're meditating, you're going to think about things which you won't necessarily think about on a daily basis, because your mind is going to be so stimulated. You're going to think about the shorts you just watched like 5 minutes ago, or the music you were listening to. But purpose is definitely found in either of those two methods. Once you've found this purpose layer, this activity, this goal to keep you occupied, could be anything. Make sure you're keeping up with these good habits to work towards that purpose. So if you're trying to be an MMA guy, trying to be a fighter guy, you've got to do drills every day. You've got to practice on the mat. You know, you've got to practice the combos, your combinations, your everything. So make sure you're keeping up with that. If that's the case, you know, any example works. But make sure you keep up with these good habits, and eventually you'll reach a state called productocracy, where it's sort of like you don't want to do anything that's not productive, because you kind of feel an innate just disgust towards doing anything like that, because you've spent the majority of your time doing something productive, which is a great state to be in, because, you know, the more you put in, the more you get out. So try and reach that state if you're capable of doing so. So when you have all these goals, when you have this purpose, when you have all these purpose layers, you're going to be much less likely to indulge in the addictions, because the main reason why you were indulging in the addictions is because you felt meaningless. But now that you have meaning, now that you have reason, now that you have purpose, the chances of you indulging, not likely at all. Thought probably won't even cross your mind if you're really that obsessed over the purpose on your mission. Make sure you get rid of any triggers for the addiction as well. So say it was video games and you keep a controller by your bed, or you keep a controller on your desk, make sure you put that out of your eyesight, because that is a very, very big reason as to why some people do indulge in their addiction even though they still do have purpose, is because things remind them of their addiction, because they're so used to just seeing these things and picking it up and indulging, or they're so used to just seeing these things and straight away going at the addiction. So make sure you this links to shedding identity, but make sure you get rid of them, just put them away, put them in your shelf, out of eyesight, and just go after it. One more piece of advice I can give if you don't know your current purpose layer is to progressively overload your suffering. And in terms of the gym, progressively overloading means progressively adding more. So if you're benching, you know, say you bench 50, the next week, you probably add an extra 2 kilograms or something, 2.5, and you do like 55 on each side, or like 52.5. But in terms of suffering, this kind of means the same thing. Say you try and suffer, you know, 3 times throughout the day, or, you know, you go for a 3-mile run, increase that to like a 5-mile run, a 6-mile run, so that you're entering different mental states. And when you enter these different mental states of suffering, more knowledge comes, more reason, more purpose can be found. So this can definitely help you find your next purpose layer if you're struggling to find that. Deep journaling as well, I might make a video on that in the future, but I'm kind of new to it currently. So deep journaling is really helping me at the moment, and can get your thoughts just on paper, and can also really help you find a decent purpose layer if you're struggling with that currently. So yeah, that's everything I have for today's video. 5 ways to break an addiction. Please do take from this and take action as well. You know, it feels great to watch these videos and hear all this great stuff being said. It feels good, but if you're not taking action, you're never going to get where you want to be. So make sure you implement building willpower, building discipline, shedding identity, distraction, and staying with purpose as your 5 methods to break an addiction. Strive for greatness, and don't be a vape puffing nerd.